Hey everybody, it's Alexander Williamson here, and this is The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium. So, today we wanted to talk about Anubias, and specifically the smaller varieties. Although this stuff holds true for the big varieties too, I definitely find it to be most helpful with the big varieties, and what we're going to talk about today is how we can increase their growth rate, because they are one of the slower growing plants, and also how you can separate them and basically make two plants out of one or three or four, depending on how it goes, and basically how far you can take that. So let's grab this Anubias out of the tank and get over to the chopping block. Alright, so we've got the Anubias over here on the cutting board. We have a couple options as far as utensils go. We've got scissors, but what I really recommend is a nice X-Acto knife or scalpel. You can get these X-Acto knives at a craft store, no problem, on Amazon. And you can get scalpels, which are even more precise and even sharper, for a pretty decent price online as well, too, sterilized and everything. So, when you're looking at Anubias, this is a classic case. This is Anubias Petite Nana Bonsai. It's a variety. And Petite Nana means it's the smallest one. If it were just Nana without the Petite, it would be a very similar plant, but it would be a little bit larger. Next stage up. Then you get into your, Coffifolias and Barterais and things like that. But we'll talk about that in other videos. This video is to show you basically this is unchecked growth, and this is what would happen if you essentially just left your Anubias to grow. This one's been growing for over a year, this one probably 2 years. They're very slow growers, and they turn into these tangled messes, basically, after some time. And they start to put off shoots like this that really you're like, well, I don't know what to do with that. Like, where would I place this? And honestly, actually, I like the shape of this one. I'm going to be sad to cut that one up. But, and you can always leave them. But definitely, when the roots have gotten to this size, I want to help you guys out and tell you some little tips and tricks about taking care of these plants. All right, so the indications you're looking for when you're trying to decide whether it's ready to split, it needs at least 6 or 7 leaves, bare minimum. And really you're looking for more like 10 plus. Because each node that you're going to cut off to have it exist on its own needs to still have the rhizome, which is this part right here, which has this it looks like a root, but it's not the little stringy roots. So these are the tap roots or the runners, and this is what holds on to rocks or wood. So if you super glued or tied the Anubias to something, these are trying to hold on for dear life. They live in flowing rivers and in on tree limbs and things like that. And so these little roots, yes, they absorb nutrients, but even more so, if you look at them, they'll have a flat section, and some of them get really long, and they are using up energy from the plant to try to hold on to a stone or a rock, and they're not really being used for sucking up nutrients per se, like a traditional root should be. Now they do intake some, but the first thing we're going to do that seems like wrong is we're going to get rid of those. So just cut them. You're going to notice the theme about just cutting things in this little caretaking video. So you can see here, there's another little web of these flat roots. There's some long stringy bits that are just coming out all over. It's because there hasn't been a cohesive trimming plan that I put into place on this Anubias whatsoever. Now, I do recommend leaving a good amount of actual, when I'm taking a look at this up close, I do recommend leaving a good amount of actual roots and root starts. You can decide how much you want to thin that out. Some people will choose to cut all the way up, and there's two schools of thought on this. And let's start on this one. So say this was our original piece, was about this big, and it grew into 2 pieces. Well, then you've got this connector piece here. And so right away we can use the big scissors, the kind of blunt crushing scissors, to split that off. We know that's going to be enough leaves. There's more than 3. It's got a nice growing direction to it. The Anubias bonsais head upwards. They grow upwards. That's their main trait that's different from Anubias petite nana regular or pinto, which has white. But we can do the same thing here. We can cut these roots, get rid of them. And then if you have any big leaves that are just unsightly, you can also get rid of those if they're turning yellow or they have holes, because a lot of people on Anubias will say, oh, you should keep these because it's such a slow growing plant that the energy that they contain, they will still start doing, or still remain active at photosynthesis, so don't get rid of them unless they're really beat up. However, to me, if this is going to be on the lower part of the plant, if it's going to be angled somewhere in your tank where it doesn't get the best light, if it's like this, you might as well get rid of them. You can either get rid of them, usually you can tell when they're ready to go because they just peel off almost so easy that they fall off. You can see some actually did here just from handling the plant. And so when you feel them like this one here too, and it's just ready to fall loose, just get rid of those because they're actually going bad right at the stalk because they're not bringing in enough nutrients. What you're looking for is the springy leaves that kind of pop back to place and they feel kind of rubbery and a little almost like plastic. And these are the ones that you want to hold on to. If they're lighter green, that means they're newer. And these are what are going to bring in the most energy to the plant. But this plant gets its other energy, its nutrients, completely from its water column feeding, its rhizome feeding. And here we can see there's some deterioration of the rhizome of the stems. It has been tucked away into a little crack, and these stems here are going to break away just super easy because it was tucked back in there. And so I'm going to use an X-Acto knife just because I don't want to hurt these other stems that are still doing well. And I'm actually going to clean up the area. You can see there's this yellowy pithy stuff. You can get rid of that too. So get rid of that. I know it feels wrong to be cutting so much away from plants, but you can get rid of that. And another side note, if you're doing a bunch of Anubias, make sure that you keep it in the water because as soon as it dries out or dehydrates within a half hour, 2 hours, just depends on your humidity, you're going to lose this springiness and it can dry out. Sometimes it'll plump back up. Other times you'll lose it completely and the plant will have to melt, as we say, and regrow these leaves. So when deciding where to cut it, if we're going to cut this piece, now since this is Anubias bonsai, you could just keep it like this. It could keep growing up and you might want to angle it so that the light is on it at an angle. But we can see there's so many nodes here, and I always say look for the natural breaks. So when you're handling the Anubias, you should find spots. Look, there was another weak leaf right there. So you should find these spots. A lot of times it's where the leaves break off. Use an X-Acto knife and just cut these nodes right below where the fork in the plant is. So there should be a couple leaves and a couple roots still left. You need that rhizome tuber and you need some of the roots. And so here, even though we've got this one, we've got a lot of top leaves. We've got a few roots, not a whole lot of tuber left or rhizome. So we're going to leave that one. We're not going to cut it anymore, even though there's like 12 leaves there. Now, but surprisingly, this little piece, you could cut this little piece again right here, and it would be okay. It doesn't actually need leaves to survive completely. So there's a good chance it will survive without its leaves. And the interesting little trick that you've waited this whole time for basically is, so say you have a blank rhizome. So say you've trimmed everything up, there's a big blank spot on the rhizome. that just didn't have any. And see, I like to get rid of these leaves that are just kind of weakly on there anyways. If they turn yellow or whatnot, you could have a nutrient deficiency, but more often than not, Anubias is a pretty low. It doesn't need a ton of nutrients. It needs It needs phosphates and it needs nitrates. So if you have a heavy fish load, it should be fine. It doesn't need much light whatsoever. So other than those things, usually those are the two things that are going wrong, if anything. But when we have the plant now, we could thin all this out with an X-Acto knife too, because at a certain point, the roots are trying to soak up as much nutrients as possible. So we can tell that this tank, it's either has too much nutrients or there's more nutrients than can be absorbed at the speed of this plant. You see the tuber runs all along here on this one. It's a very old plant, actually. But it's using all these little tap roots. They've gone crazy because this was behind a rock that had heavy flow. So it was trying to catch all the nutrients in the water because it only gets energy from the sun so much. It needs to get its building bulk from the vitamins and minerals in the water, the fertilizers. And after a certain point, the water is just, it's not going to, the plant can't grow past a certain speed. It's just a slow growing plant. So you can clean this up if you want. It's already probably maxed out at its growth speed, honestly. It's trying to put out a million little rhizomes all over, or a little tap roots all over. And when they have these little white ends, that means these are definitely the ones that are designed to hold on to surfaces too, just like these flat ones. But the last little trick that I want to tell you about, if you have one of these plants and you're down to the rhizome and you're thinking, okay, well, I've got some stems on this side. What do I do to this side? This is the thing that seems wrong. But you're going to take your X-Acto knife and you're going to take little slits every 2 millimeters or so. You're going to cut it and you're going to cut a little triangle out, a little wedge. Or you can kind of just do a little removal circle, half circle like that. Now, scarring this tissue will cause undifferentiated cells in the plant to try to fill in this. Just like we scab, they'll try to fill it in, but the undifferentiated cells that go there, the stem cells, will actually cause leaves to grow or a new branch to grow off of the initial rhizome most of the time. If not that, sometimes they'll grow roots. Basically, the plant just will know what to do. It will grow more of whatever it needs. If it needs more nutrients, if it thinks it can grow faster because it has enough light, but it needs more nutrients, it'll put out all these roots to a certain point. And then if you get to a point where it's just a tangled rat's nest, it's probably maxing out somewhere at that point, because you'll just see that they get more and more tangled and then they start to die and fall away on their own. But I think this is a pretty thorough coverage of how to take care of these smaller Anubias plants. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the chat below, no problem. And there's some links to my favorite people, Aquatic Arts, and a few other spots where you can get plants and also tools and things like that from Amazon affiliate links, as well as my merch, Patreon. All that stuff is linked below if interested. So thanks for joining. Have a great day. Take care of your tanks and your scapes. And, get rid of deadheads. Don't be afraid to trim off a whole lot of stuff, even from little plants. Cutting away is the way you're going to get more. It's the way you're going to get density in plants. This one I did trim when it was smaller, and so you can see it has 2 stalks, both headed upward, nice, thick, lush, springy leaves, good roots. So it's doing a lot better than the initial branch that branched off at the same time that got all leggy. Now, some people are looking for this look. Maybe you have an aquascape where you need that, but that's just a little more advice. If you turn the light up and the nutrients are already high in the water, it's going to put out a lot of roots, a lot of little leaves, and it's going to try to take over surface area of sunlight so that it can process all the fertilizer in the water. Now, if you have low ferts in the water, it'll probably stick with the big leaves and try to use the energy of the the light coming in more, and have a little bit less of the taproot running roots. So, all right, guys, I hope that helps. I hope that your scape looks great, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.